All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to talk about something that goes way beyond the usual conversations around bias. We're looking at a new framework that really promises a much, much deeper way of understanding what's going on in our workplaces. So, let's just start with a question that I think a lot of us have asked ourselves. Why is it that our best intentions on diversity so often seem to fail? I mean, companies pour all this money and energy into these big D&I programs, but so often the needle just doesn't move. So, what are we missing here?
Well, the source we're looking at today offers a pretty radical answer. It's this idea that systemic bias isn't really an external problem, something wrong with our policies or hiring practices. Instead, it's a direct reflection of something happening inside of us, our own conditioned ways of seeing the world. That really flips the script, doesn't it? And that is the absolute key takeaway. If our DEI work isn't working, it's probably because we're just treating the symptoms, not the actual disease. The root issue isn't what program we're running, it's the lens through which we see everything, a lens that's been shaped and conditioned our whole lives, often without us even noticing.
To help us get our heads around this, the source uses this fantastic metaphor, the two walls of perception. Think about it this way. On one side, you've got the mirroring wall, which is what folks in privileged positions tend to experience. It acts like a mirror. It just reflects back the ideas and beliefs you already have, making it really hard for anything new to get in. And on the other side, there is the opaque wall, which is what marginalized groups often face. It's not a mirror, it's a solid wall. You can see the problem, but the wall itself makes it impossible to see a clear path forward.
And just to be super clear, we're not talking about actual physical walls. These are invisible barriers, yeah? They're created by two totally different ways of experiencing the exact same workplace. It's like two people can be standing in the same room, at the same meeting, but they are living in completely different realities because their internal consciousness is just wired differently. Okay, so if these walls are real, what are they actually made of? What are the bricks and mortar holding these invisible barriers up? Let's spend a little time deconstructing them. So let's start with that opaque wall, the one that blocks the view for marginalized people. The source argues that this wall is built from something it calls the pillars of caste. These are these deeply, deeply embedded societal rules that basically lock people into a specific position. And when you look at the bricks that build this wall, it gets pretty intense. These are concepts like heritability, which is the idea that you're just born into your station in life and that's that. Or the idea of purity versus pollution, which creates this social hierarchy. There's even terror as enforcement, the use of fear and intimidation to keep things as they are. You can see how these aren't just abstract ideas, right? They form a super rigid structure that makes it feel almost impossible to imagine a different reality from the inside. Okay, so that's the opaque wall. What about the other one, the mirroring wall? Well, if the opaque wall is like the external prison, the mirroring wall is the internal operating system. It runs on a set of cultural norms that the source calls the edicts of supremacy culture. And you can see how this software works right here. It's got these programs running in the background, like perfectionism, which makes it almost impossible to admit you're wrong or that another way might be better. Or a fear of open conflict, which makes us shut down tough conversations. And a huge one is the right to comfort. Think about it. Someone brings up an uncomfortable but really important point in a meeting, and what happens? The topic gets changed really fast. That's the software in action, prioritizing the comfort of the dominant group over actual progress. It's an incredibly powerful defense mechanism.
All right, so we've kind of taken the problem apart, but what do we do about it? How in the world do we learn to see past these walls that we might not even know are there? Well, the source does propose a way forward, a totally new way of seeing.
The big idea here is that seeing beyond our own conditioning isn't some kind of superpower or mystical gift. It's a skill. It's a capacity that can be trained. Just like you go to the gym to train a muscle, you can actually train your mind to develop new ways of perceiving the world, ways that let you see right through these invisible walls. And here's how it's done, a 3-step cognitive practice. It starts with imagination. So this is a focused mental exercise. You take a rigid idea you have, maybe power hoarding. You really visualize it, you hold it in your mind, and then you consciously, intentionally dissolve that image. The point isn't to pretend it's not real, but to train your mind not to be so glued to its own concepts. Step 2 is inspiration. This is all about quieting that inner voice, that constant chatter, to create a space, an emptied consciousness where you can just receive new information without all your usual filters. Someone gives you tough feedback, and instead of your mind instantly jumping to defend itself, you create a moment of silence to just hear it, really let it in. And over time, this leads to step 3, intuition. This is where that new awareness just becomes a part of you. And you start seeing people and situations with so much more clarity and acting from a much more connected, holistic place.
So you do all this work, you do this practice. What's the end game? What are you actually building? The ultimate goal is to develop something the source calls supercultural knowledge. Let's break down exactly what that is.
Let's unpack that. Supercultural knowledge is, at its heart, the ability to genuinely see and understand someone else's experience, free from the blinders of your own cultural programming. It's about getting to a place where you can perceive reality beyond your own mirroring wall, or finally see a clear path through the opaque wall.
And why should you care about this? Well, this is where the rubber really meets the road. Developing this capacity is what actually dismantles those invisible barriers from the inside out. It's what allows for real, authentic connection between people, and that is what finally unlocks all the innovation and potential that diversity is supposed to bring. You end up building an organization that isn't just more fair, but is way more conscious, more resilient, and frankly, more effective.
So when you boil it all down, we're left with this really powerful choice. For anyone in a leadership position, the question completely changes. It stops being, which DEI program should we buy? And it becomes, which new human capacities do we need to start building in ourselves and in our teams? It reframes the whole challenge from a quick fix to deep, meaningful work. And that really leaves us with one final question to think about. Is your organization just polishing its surface, running the same old programs that look good on paper but don't really change anything? Or is it ready to do the deeper work of building an entirely new consciousness? The answer to that question will probably define its entire future.